It is exactly as the title sounds. He did commit fraud for $3.6 million, and he does return to the megachurch that he helped build as a pastor, not as a member, not adjacently related to this fraud case, but exactly as it sounds, just as bad as it sounds. We have three terrible pieces of news today about contacting tribes, about fraud, and about a sexting. In Portuguese, a solar panel device has been used to contact isolated tribes in Brazil. If you thought the age of Christian missionaries traveling the world spread to God and evangelize locals was over, think again. They've gotten sneakier. So obviously there's always been rules in place and more regulations with how people can evangelize in the Muslim world. Actually, if you're a Christian evangelist, for example, and want to put out anything there, you have to say not for Muslim use, because there's a law in Muslim doctrine and a Muslim speaking world that you're not allowed to try and convert Muslims. So all of these, different ideas, different imaginations battle here. But for the battle of trying to sell Christianity to unconquered tribes, obviously, like Columbus did to the Native Americans, bringing diseases and smallpox, there have been moves by governments to try and protect these uncontacted tribes more and more, yet Christian missionaries are stubborn. Currently, The Guardian and Brazilian newspaper O Globo reveals that they have used solar-powered audio devices near the Peruvian border in an attempt to evangelize isolated or recently contacted indigenous Amazonian people. They'll play biblical recordings in Portuguese and Spanish over the solar-powered radios. For example, look here, a device identified. Let's see what Paul says as he considers his own life in Philippians. If someone thinks they have reasons to put confidence in the flesh, I have more. So yeah, that's Christian missionary work there in the digital form, powered by the sun. And this indigenous tribe has the highest concentration of uncontacted human groups in the world. And of course, as I mentioned, the government, the Brazilian Foundation for the Indian, made it illegal to enter the valley in 1987. So this is laws that have existed for 40 years almost, yet people are trying to do this, submit audio devices through the uncontacted tribe. And if you think like a normal human being, you think, just leave the uncontacted tribe alone. They're uncontacted. They have no need for your Christianity. But to the Christian mind, they think that their religion is the truth. And not just that it's the truth, like maybe I think a political ideology is true. They think it's more than true. It's a sort of super truth that invades and pervades every facet of our life. In the fact that even once we die, it is more ultimate than that. So for something that you hold to be true or valuable, a religious person holds their religious truth to be even somehow more valuable than that, more valuable to the point that you want to break the law. And so, for example, I am a left-leaning person, but I'm not going to go to an uncontacted tribe somewhere in the Americas and blast, hey, vote for Kamala Harris last year. It's like it would be in my interest if they would vote for them, but it's not something that I'm going to break the law over. But for Christians, it is something that they do break the law over. They might think it's too, like if you think about North Korean people who are living in their cloistered society, and sometimes they get South Korean media or American media, all these different things kind of poured into them secretly, right? Smuggled over. That's probably what they're thinking about their religion, except it's not in the form of fun drama. It's in the form of misogynistic religion, which is Christianity. The Kurobo are members of a recently contacted group of indigenous people known for their war clubs. Definitely wouldn't want to screw with them, but I guess, Christians have their own battle to play. And according to the investigation, the device is now in the hands of a Kurobo woman named Maya. So it's not just that they played it on the border, but apparently so close that the people from the indigenous communities were able to take it for themselves. Reportedly, they called the device a messenger. In the Baptist organization, okay, so it's Baptists, a very known group within Christian Protestantism for their zeal. The Baptist organization Touch Ministries donated them to unreached people, is the word they use, around the world, as reported by the investigation. And in fact, their website clearly features what seems to be a device along with a host of similar gadgets. Let's take a gander here. I'm actually quite curious. Oh, okay. It looks like that they took down the page. They're probably facing legal and public scrutiny. So yeah, it makes sense for them to not have that page up anymore. Or the URL was broken in the first place. What began with a solar-powered audio player containing the Bible and Dr. Stanley's messages is now much more than a device, reads the website. Wherever you go, we look for the right solution at the right time. M- is probably lazy, used ChatGPT to generate the description, whether it's one of the proprietary devices or another tool to make sure the message of salvation is Jesus Christ is available to those who have never heard. And of course, as I mentioned, they do not want to be sued more than they want to propel the gospel of Jesus Christ. So like the Mormons did in the 20th century, they are doing now and taking it down, taking it back. In Touch Ministries Chief Operating Officer Seth Gray, however, told The Guardian, we don't go anywhere. We're not allowed. So there you go. Already, once this investigation started a couple of days back, they were already backpedaling it, and now they're backpedaling it this far. So that is, I suppose, funny in my mind. Of course, there's the liability of somebody's afterlife and your whole zealous argument and crusade. But when you get in legal or financial trouble, then you have to walk it back. Last paragraph here, in case anyone forgot since the last time, Westerners trying to contact isolated tribal people. Such contact could transmit devastating diseases, right, to communities with little to no immunity to them. Again, think Columbus and smallpox. You can do that again and again and again and again if you contact uncontacted human tribes because they have not been vaccinated, they have not lived in human society as we have. Of course, the risk is higher in the case of direct physical contact. Sure, I suppose the gadgets, it's still an indirect risk, though. And it violates Brazil's public policy laws for the protection of Indigenous people. So morally, ethically, legally, all abhorrent. But something that this ministry was happy to do, and something that they're happy to backtrack now that they're probably getting in trouble. So again, another case of hypocrisy, another case of absolute arrogance and haughtiness from Christian missionaries. Okay, well, let's look at the next, even more unfortunate piece of news here. But before I show you that, I would like to request that you subscribe. This channel is something that I'm putting a lot of energy and work into. I like to talk about different ideas of philosophy, science, and religion from all different aspects. And specifically, I'm working on a book to help people who are deconverting from religion. It's a very imprisoning way of thinking to have the idea that there is some sort of absolute truth you must abide to. And so I want to write about that, living in a world where nobody is watching. And I'll be posting more about those updates, more about the world in terms of news from a religious and irreligious perspective. So please subscribe for more content. It only costs you a click. 7 arrested at Jackson Township Hotel for sexting. And you might think, what does this have to do with religion? Well, let's take a look at the members here of the suspect. 7 men were arrested as they showed up at a township hotel hoping to have sex with a 14-year-old girl, police said in a statement released August 4th. So continuously, absolutely abhorrent behavior. Who are the types of people who are involved with this abhorrent behavior? Have your guesses. Maybe prepare your bingo cards. Maybe they voted for the person who is running the country of the United States. But let's take a gander. Those arrested include a Massillon man who served as a children's youth leader at a church in Massillon. Okay, so someone who's supposed to be a pinnacle of the community, someone supposed to be a religious and ethical, moral figure for children to look up to, is in fact abusing them, is in fact taking advantage of their trust, or going through a sort of sexting operation with 6 other people, 6 acquaintances, and trying to have sex with a 14-year-old girl. So continuously, absolutely abhorrent behavior. It goes to show that anybody in a position of power is not immune to being corrupt, is not immune to taking advantage of people. But for some reason, those with religious ties, those with claims to religious authority are immune from that to the very end where it is unfortunately too late. I'm reading this article for the first time along with you guys, so let's continue on. This man's profile was removed from the church's website. Yeah, I figure that much. Messages were left August 4th with the church's pastor. So this is all incredibly recent. I would be interested if the church website had a Wayback Machine log. You could see probably the person who was there now. He and 3 others Another 38-year-old, 66-year-old, and a 48-year-old face counts of importuning, attempting to commit unlawful sexual conduct with a minor, possessing criminal tools, all felonies. So really just a wonderful gang of individuals. You see how none of these other people have any sort of status in society. So there's really there's really no depth for how low somebody can go for these absolutely abhorrent behaviors. And it is the same people, the same religious people who, when arguing to me about the principles of morality, about their so-called objective morality, are the people who say that an atheist, nihilist, an existentialist, whatever you may claim, without any view of the afterlife, without any sort of divine commander, will have no legal guardrails, no moral guardrails for how you can exist throughout your life. And so, of course, there's nothing stopping me from doing all of these horrible acts. Well, I could boldly attest to you that I have done no rapings, no attempting to have sex with 14-year-old pedophilia stings, and that has been in no due parts due to the idea that some religious idea or entity is backing my decision there. Yet, at the same time, again, a children's youth leader from a church is free to do something absolutely terrible. And of course, the scapegoat is that, oh, this guy is just a piece of shit. That doesn't say anything about the religion. Jesus is good, God is good, all of that. And to that I say, okay, that's fine. Yeah, sure, one bad apple isn't indicative of the whole bunch, I suppose. But we see this time and time and time and time and time and time again. And so if you've noticed, I started to now talk about these different news articles from abhorrent religious behavior. I think it's necessary to really show the gratuitous depths to how often, how frequent, and how absolutely horrible people are. And people do horrible things in the name of their alleged God or with their title and pieces of power to back them up. So, you might call it a good car that it's a really good car, but if you try to turn the engine on 100 times and it doesn't run, is it a good car that just doesn't run, or is it a broken car? I don't know. If you have 100 cases of people in religious positions of power taking advantage of minors, trying to be pedophiles, being pedophiles, committing fraud and all these other terrible things, is it the fact that the religion itself is a good religion? It just has some bad users, or is religion in and of itself a dangerous tool? He and 3 others were charged. And then here is another 44-year-old man charged with felony importuning, attempted to commit rape, and possessing criminal tools. Absolutely terrible. Also arrested a 24-year-old Pittsburgh man and a 28-year-old Canton man during the sting, charging them with importuning, attempt to commit unlawful sexual conduct with a minor, and possession of criminal tools. All felonies. The men are allegedly in the, that's a bit of a typo, in the count illegally, and were referred to the Department of Homeland Security enforcement and removal operations for deportation. Okay, so this is absolutely disgusting behavior. I would like to see a bit more details on this case, but it is not surprising to me that you see people in positions of religious power taking abuse of minors. And to think, too, that he wasn't just a pastor in the church, but specifically a youth leader at the church. Someone who is supposed to be specifically in charge of children, people going through adolescence, people that he should supposedly be the most empathetic towards, are the profile of what this person wants to abuse and wants to molest. So it is completely disgusting, and it is a good example of a wolf in sheep's clothing, I suppose, which is, again, something you see time and time again. I could make these videos, unfortunately, probably every day, and I'd run out of days in the year to report on the number of times that this happens. One last case here now on fraud. Fraud to such an extent, as crazy as it seems, that he's able to yet come back to his church after $3.6 million fraud case, returns to the megachurch after his prison release. Well, let me read that again. Houston pastor convicted in a $3.6 million fraud case, returns to the megachurch after the prison release. So let's just make sure, though, that we're not, misinterpreting. Maybe the headline is over sensationalized. Maybe it's like he returned as a church member. Maybe he was adjacently involved, but not really the target of the case. It's possible that this is written really out of proportion. So let's find the details here. Houston pastor Kirby John Caldwell, that is a interesting name, returned to the megachurch he helped build in Southwest Houston. So this is another case. We looked the other day too at a much smaller case of fraud, only $300,000, of a Tennessee pastor at age 80 who was convicted for 15 years for once he had stopped his food donation program. They found that $300,000 were missing. He had used it to renovate his own home, to buy a Chevy Silverado 2018, and also try and do sexual acts. I don't know why they don't just say prostitution. And I'm sure it's likely that the subject of that prostitution was underage. That wasn't reported. But the whole point is, it is so often the case where somebody builds up a religious organization for whatever reasons they say they might, but in the back end, when you take a look inside, they're committing fraud. And it looks like that's the case again here. Again, it says that Kirby John Caldwell helped build this church. So I suppose that there's special lead to him taking 3.6 million out of it. But again, I'm trying too hard perhaps to paint this man poorly. Let's actually learn a bit more about the context. His return on Sunday comes nearly a year after his release. Okay, so he had a year between his time off and getting back to the church after pleading guilty to wire fraud. Okay, so no, it wasn't that he was, vaguely related and this is a sensational headline. It's not that maybe he was maybe the 3.6 million fraud part was part of the case, but the real thing was something much more minor. No. He pled guilty for wire fraud. So it's exactly as the title sounds, committed 3.6 million in fraud. He once served as a spiritual advisor to George Bush. Wow, quite the reputation. And Obama. Okay. Served time behind bars in Buurmount for defrauding investors out of nearly $3.6 million. Federal court documents show Caldwell's co-conspirator was responsible for finding investors. Caldwell says no one from his church was defrauded. I'm sure we can take him at his word. Court documents show Caldwell paid full restitution. Okay, sure. Caldwell took to the mic Sunday. I went the way to Beaumont, Texas, looked all around, couldn't find nobody. Caldwell said his congregations and Fred welcomed him with open arms. It's such a blessing to have our visionary pastor back at the church. We are so excited, a member of the church said. So, yes, it is exactly as the title sounds. He did commit fraud for $3.6 million, and he does return to the megachurch that he helped build as a pastor, not as a member, not adjacently related to this fraud case, but exactly as it sounds, just as bad as it sounds. But I'm sure that they're going to try to wrap this around into a beautiful story about forgiveness, beautiful story about the Christian heart, and not a story about how fraud like this occurs all the time. My friend is home and free to use all of his skills and gifts to not only pastor this church, but pastor this community. Replace the word with fraud, and I think that would be a lot more accurate to what actually is going on. Clever and Cleaver and others, it's too funny, right, that his name is Clever, and others in the community said they believe Caldwell has repented. There it is. There's the story of forgiveness. Repented and is touched by God to continue his work. I think this is the most abhorrent use of Christianity and the most, I guess, useful part of it to leaders, and why Trump, despite his existence from any sane perspective, literally being perhaps the opposite of what Christ's idea for a good human was supposed to envision. He's slothful, eats McDonald's all the time. He's prideful. He lies. He cheats on all of his wives. He is not a good neighbor. He's terrible to everybody, right? All of these things, and if anyone says Trump is a good Christian, I refer you to the great interview he had years back when his favorite Bible verse was asked, and he couldn't give an answer. So He, though, is using Christianity. He's speaking to the evangelical, to the trad cath, all of those groups in America, and is using them. And part of him using them, it sounds so contradictory if you follow like what the core of Jesus' teaching is supposed to be about love, about forgiveness, about all of these different giving to the poor, right? Not being a coveting for money so much. Of course, there's like a parable from Jesus about if you want to get into the kingdom of heaven, sell all your possessions and give it to the poor, and the guy leaves dejected because he can't do that. So it's like, yeah, the most powerful people are not being Christian images, yet the most powerful people are using the Christian images. I'm sure we could talk at length about Joel Osteen, about, I can't think of his name now, but he's literally a ghoul walking on the earth. These mega pastors that just get so much money, like absurd amounts of money from their congregation, and it's not abnormal. It's like as American as apple pie. And so this then, when they actually get caught for fraud, they come back and get accepted again. And it's a story about repentance. It's a story about being able to overcome their sins, to really ask the Lord and their community forgiveness, and being taken back. But the worst part about this, though, is it's forgiveness without accountability. It's lack of accountability, and it excuses a lack of accountability. And Christians might argue with this. Well, then, okay, if you think that every wrongdoing must be atoned equal to the wrongdoing, look at the code of Hammurabi, right? An eye for an eye leaves the world blind. You can't atone for everything wrong you've done in equal proportion. It's not. You need forgiveness, and that's the most beautiful message of Jesus. Okay, I can understand to some extent, right? There's an extent to which you can do wrong and ask for forgiveness. Sorry for the camera. And there's an extent to what you can actually do to make up for that. But if you're a leader of a community and you've committed millions of dollars in fraud, you should not be a leader. And again, you should not be a leader. That's it. If you, whatever penance you do, whatever forgiveness you ask for, that's fine. Sure, maybe, after you've paid your time in prison, you can come back and be loved by the people around you. But you shouldn't become a leader again because you manipulate people and do fraud. I don't know the details of this case and to how he committed $3.6 million in wire fraud, but the fact of the matter is this guy did $3.6 million in wire fraud. He used his position as a leader to take advantage of others and commit fraud. It's as simple as that. They should not let him be a leader again, right? If I was the co-founder of this church, I would find a way to use the other resources and not let him back in the church with a position of power. And I think that would be a completely fair and equitable way to handle the situation. Right. And it's not like, well, I don't want one bad thing to ruin my career. Of course, there's room for forgiveness. Of course, there's room to make up for what's lost. And again, this guy should be able to come back in society. He should be able to work again. But come on, like, he shouldn't be a leader of a church because he's going to do the same thing again. I would not be surprised if we saw a similar news article, former fraud pastor does fraud again. It is, I think, not a good decision, but whatever. Maybe that's just me. I don't know what you guys think. Let me know below. Let's read the rest of the article. So there's a big word that we use biblically and theological, and it's forgiveness. There it is, folks. Forgiveness. It's all good. 3.6 mil down the drain. Don't worry about it. Hey, don't worry about it, man. It's okay. Why don't you go up on the pulpit and ask for our tithing money again? And we'll forget that you did that big number bye-bye scandal. And somebody who cannot move past that maybe should rethink their commitment to God. Okay, so it's not just saying that we forgive him. It's also saying we forgive him, and if you disagree with us, then you're wrong, and your relationship with God is wrong. So it's not just, this is like a classic narcissistic technique. It's not just to deject and reject what you say, but then say that what you say is also completely wrong in addition to that, right? So it's excluding, it's not just, it's purporting what you're saying and excluding them simultaneously. So classic narcissistic behavior. The church announced that Caldwell will deliver his first sermon back next Sunday. I'm sure that's going to go great. But unfortunately, I said that with a hint of sarcasm, but I think, frankly, it will go great. I'm sure they'll receive him with open arms. And I'm sure this whole message of forgiveness, despite $3.6 million being lost, will be taken as it is. So there it is. In summary, we have 3 articles about missionaries trying to overstep their boundaries. We have a sexting with a minor, and we have a pastor doing 3.6 million in fraud and being welcomed back as a pastor. And I should mention, 2 of these articles are from today. The one about the Brazilian indigenous peoples is from last week. But this isn't like I looked over the last 3 months within Christian religious news and scandals and found these. This is from the last 24 hours, basically. And that's the state of affairs. That's it. So I want to continue doing this. I want to continue doing research. I suppose you could call this journalism. It's just a YouTube video looking at a couple articles. But hey, subscribe if you're interested for more. And look at my Patreon as well, where there's a lot of bonus content. Thanks so much.